Kleppers Corner. Today in history, August 22nd. Welcome back to Kleppers Corner, the only show that dares to say, yes, I'm going to talk about history, and no, you don't get to scroll past me to see another cat doing parkour. Today we're diving into August 22nd, a date that, much like Florida Man, keeps showing up in the police blotter of history. This is the day kings got dethroned. Rules for war were actually invented, because before this, people apparently thought nailing your enemy's head to a tree was just sportsmanship. And also, the day French President Charles de Gaulle was targeted in an assassination attempt so wild, it later inspired a best-selling thriller. Yeah, August 22nd isn't a day, it's a full Netflix limited series. So buckle in. We've got battles, treaties, coups, assassinations, and enough WTF history moments to make you wonder if this date is cursed. Segment 1, the Battle of Bosworth Field, 1485. On August 22nd, 1485, England decided to host one of its most brutal Game of Thrones episodes. Except this wasn't HBO, it was real life. This was the Battle of Bosworth Field, where King Richard III, last of the Plantagenets, faced off against Henry Tudor, who, until this battle, had the royal credibility of a guy who shows up to Thanksgiving and insists he's next in line for Grandma's house because he once watered her plants. Now, Richard III has a reputation, thanks to Shakespeare, of being the scheming, hunchbacked villain who killed his nephews in the Tower, which, to be fair, is a tough thing to spin on a resume. Try explaining that in a job interview. So, Richard, I see here under skills you've listed backstabbing and also just regular stabbing. Henry Tudor's claim to the throne was weaker than a knockoff IKEA table. He was like the great-great-grandnephew of someone's cousin's dog walker on the Lancaster side. But England was tired of Richard. Tired of civil wars, and very ready for someone, anyone, to just stop the chaos. So Henry comes back from exile in France, gathers an army of Welshmen and mercenaries, and says, "Don't worry, guys, I'm the chosen one." Which, in politics, usually translates to, "Please ignore the fact that I'm not qualified, just look at this flag." But here's the kicker. The Stanley family. They were like the political consultants of the 15th century, famous for never committing to anything until they knew which way the wind was blowing. Richard demanded their loyalty. Henry asked for their help. And the Stanleys just sat there like the swing voters of medieval England. Richard even held one Stanley son hostage, and the father's response was basically, I've got other sons. Parenting in the 1400s was savage. So the battle kicks off. Richard has more men, the high ground, and a reputation for being ferocious. Henry, he's outnumbered, but has better PR. The fighting is brutal, and Richard sees Henry isolated. So he does what every action movie villain does. He charges straight at him, thinking he can end it with one kill. Spoiler, it doesn't work. So William Stanley finally picks a side, swoops in to save Henry, and Richard ends up dead in the mud. The last English king to literally die on the battlefield. His crown is found in a bush and plopped onto Henry's head, which is the medieval equivalent of, "You win, here's your tiara." Richard III's death wasn't just the end of a king. It was the end of an era. Henry became Henry VII, founder of the Tudor dynasty, and suddenly England had stability, unity, and eventually Henry VIII, who brought 6 wives, 2 beheadings, and a religious crisis. So yeah, thanks, Henry. Takeaway? Sometimes history changes not because of bravery or destiny, but because one powerful family says, "Fine, we'll back you, if you promise to let us keep our land." Segment 2. The First Geneva Convention, 1864. Fast forward to 1864. Europe finally realized war was maybe a little too brutal. I know, shocking. It only took, a few thousand years of stabbing each other with progressively sharper sticks? Enter Henri Junot, a Swiss businessman who stumbled upon the aftermath of the Battle of Solferino in 1859. Tens of thousands of men were left wounded with zero medical care. Junot took one look and thought, yikes, somebody should really do something about this. Also, I'm late for my business meeting. Instead of walking away, he wrote a book called A Memory of Solferino, which was essentially the world's first Yelp review of war. 1 star, too bloody, would not recommend. But he added a proposal. What if, and hear me out, we actually took care of wounded soldiers, even the enemy ones? This was revolutionary. Up until then, the standard policy was, if you're bleeding, you're basically compost. So in Geneva, 12 nations signed a treaty, the first Geneva Convention, that said from now on, if you're wounded, you get treated. Doesn't matter whose side you're on. They also introduced the Red Cross emblem as a neutral symbol because apparently armies needed a big, obvious logo to remind them, don't shoot the people helping the bleeding guy. Of course, some generals hated this idea. They thought, why should I help the enemy survive so he can come back and shoot me? But cooler heads prevailed, and suddenly we had international humanitarian law, or as future dictators would call it, that annoying thing that says I can't just do whatever I want. The Geneva Convention grew over the years. More protections, rules for prisoners of war, even civilians, which, again, crazy that it took until the mid-20th century for humanity to decide maybe don't bomb civilians just because you can. Progress is slow, folks. Takeaway, humanity occasionally remembers it has a conscience, but only after thousands of people have bled to death on a battlefield. Segment 3, the attempt on Charles de Gaulle, 1962. Now to 1962, Paris. Charles de Gaulle, president of France, is riding in his sleek Citroën DS, nicknamed the Goddess, when suddenly 12 gunmen opened fire with submachine guns. This wasn't a Tarantino film. This was an actual assassination attempt, carried out by the OAS, a far-right group furious at de Gaulle for granting Algeria independence. Picture it. 140 bullets sprayed at his car, tires blown out, rear windows shattered. De Gaulle and his wife duck down as the chauffeur somehow speeds away on flat tires thanks to the car's futuristic suspension system. The Citroën DS basically pulled off a Fast and Furious stunt in real life, making it the uncredited hero of French democracy. Now, the OAS thought killing de Gaulle would stop Algerian independence. Instead, it made de Gaulle look like a badass. The man survived an ambush and came out calmer than most of us after spilling coffee on a white shirt. His response to his wife? You are brave, Yvonne, which is French for, this marriage isn't ending in divorce court, but in a blaze of gunfire. The conspirators were caught, tried, and their leader executed. The OAS lost credibility, Algeria became independent, and de Gaulle emerged stronger than ever. Sometimes, history is just that blunt. You try to kill a guy, miss, and accidentally make him a national hero. Takeaway, if you're going to overthrow a president, maybe don't do it in a way that makes his car the most stylish escape vehicle in history. In conclusion, so what do we learn from August 22nd? That power shifts on battlefields, compassion sometimes sneaks its way into war, and assassination attempts often backfire. Literally. From muddy English fields to Swiss treaties to Parisian ambushes, this date proves one thing. History is messy, violent, and occasionally hilarious in hindsight. And while August 22nd gave us kings dethroned, humanitarian revolutions, and French presidents dodging bullets, it also gave us a reminder that progress usually comes after chaos. And sometimes the most important thing in history isn't the battle or the treaty, but the timing. So remember, if you wake up on August 22nd, maybe stay inside. History's track record with this date is not great.